Sandy Wyllie. I'm going to talk about two things today. Panic attacks, how they can feel like you're actually dying, and therapists who have their own agenda. First, panic attacks. Panic attacks, if any of you have them, feel like you're really dying. They do. They feel like, the whole earth is going to swallow you up whole. Like impending gloom. Like a tsunami washing over you. It's a horrible, horrible feeling to have. Have any of you guys had them? If you have, leave a comment and let me know your experiences with them. I don't even think, from my experience, I know, what sets them off or what, I can be fine one moment and then all of a sudden, boom, they're on me just like that. I always think there's an underlying unconscious thing that's happening that you're not aware of, that there really is a reason for them. But at that time, you're not aware of it. It's something underlying in your subconscious that's bothering you. But, you feel fine one moment and then, the next you're not. And it's really scary. I mean, if anyone just says, oh, calm down, oh, you're fine, you're all right, no one should be saying that to someone. They have no idea what it's like. You just can't calm down when you're having a panic attack. And anyone who tells you that is being very insensitive, okay? Because if you could just calm down, don't you think that you would have already done it and you wouldn't be in the middle of having one of those terrible, horrible panic attacks? I had panic attacks when I was seeing this therapist. His name was Brad. He was a horrible, horrible therapist. He had his own agenda. That's why therapists should never have their own agenda. Okay? You got to let the patient take the lead. Follow the patient. Be intuitive. Listen. You can ask questions, but, go slow. Make the patient think about things. Don't force your own agenda. He wanted to force his agenda that my father, was very bad, and he kept asking me questions. Weren't you afraid of him? Wasn't he scary? When he was in the psychotic episodes, he was, but he made him out to be like the bad guy, the bad parent, when actually my mother was the bad parent who physically and verbally abused me. My father never physically abused me. He never laid a hand on me. He never yelled at me. He might have gotten too enraged when he was in one of his psychotic episodes because he was schizophrenic. But it was never directed at me. It was directed at, someone else, those bad guys out there. Never at me, like my mother. She directed all her anger and hostility and at me, personally. So, and he was just horrible. I kept, trying to get him to stop, and I'd have panic attacks every day, especially on my way over to therapy. And you can get real dizzy. Imagine driving along and having a panic attack and you lose control of the car. You can pass out. Panic attacks make people pass out. That bad. They can feel very dizzy and yeah, it's horrible. So as soon as I stopped seeing this psychologist, the panic attacks stopped. So guess what? They were directly related to this psychologist. I didn't know that at the time that they were, but they were, because as soon as I stopped seeing them, they ended. This psychologist, his name was Brad. He had his practice out of his home, but he didn't have a home office. It was in his living room. Now, a lot of psychologists have their offices, out of their home, but they're separate. So they have a separate entry and a separate place where their patients come in, an office that is separated from the living area where they live with their family. But this psychologist, he didn't have that. You just walked in his living room and sat there, on his couch. You didn't have a separate entryway or a separate office for his patients. And I don't think that's right at all. Right there, that just tells you he doesn't have any boundary from his living quarters to where he practices his therapy with his patients. And he was just putting me in a tizzy. He just wanted to keep throwing my father in my face. And when I asked him why, he said sarcastically, "What, would you rather me ask you questions about your mother?" Now, you shouldn't be, being cruel like that and sarcastic with a patient that's coming to you who's very vulnerable for help. That's wrong, This guy was very unethical. There's a lot of things I could tell you about him that someone else took this man to the board. Yeah. A husband of one of the patients he was seeing. So what does that tell you? Okay. He was really messed up. All of the shrinks that I saw, every single one of them, and I saw dozens and dozens of them over the course of 20 years, were all messed up. That's why people go into this profession, because they're messed up themselves. So, buyer beware. I've stopped going to therapy altogether because it's never helped me. In fact, it's hurt me immensely. And that's why I'm doing these videos, to educate people that beware, okay? If you're going to a therapist and you're getting worse and you're feeling panic before you see them, or panic after, or feeling worse after you see them, listen to your gut, okay? Listen and heed my advice. Get out, okay? I almost had a nervous breakdown. It was that bad. I was having panic attacks all day, every day. All day, every day. Yes. Imagine if you've had one, how bad they are. They could last a minute. They can last for hours. Mine lasted for days. I thought I was going out of my mind. I thought I'd have to be committed. I never was committed. I'm not saying that's wrong if someone is committed to a psychiatric ward. I never even was in a day program where you go for a few hours every day. But people who've done that, who needed that, that's fine. I'm just saying I never had a breakdown. I thought I was this close to having a breakdown, but I never actually went over the edge. Never went there. But with this psychologist, I came this close to going over the edge and having a complete breakdown. Thank God. I stopped seeing him, and therefore the panic attacks stopped. It was just like, calm. But you need to listen, and that's not just with a psychologist. That's with, if it's your boyfriend, your husband, your parent, your friends, your child. If you are feeling intense panic around a certain person, no matter whom that person is, get out of that relationship, because they're not doing you any good, okay? Listen to your body. I didn't listen to my body. I stayed in that therapy way too long, to the point where I was dysfunctional. Panic attacks can make you feel dysfunctional. I couldn't go anywhere by myself. I didn't want to leave the house alone. I was afraid to get in the car and drive, because what if I got a dizzy spell and I'm in the car? If you get dizzy and you pass out and you're driving, you can get into a major accident. You could harm yourself and you can harm someone else. So I was completely like an invalid. I couldn't do anything. I was really scared that I was going to have to be hospitalized. That the panic was that bad that I was going to have to be hospitalized. And it was because of that shrink. Because as soon as I stopped seeing him, the panic attacks stopped. So I really think, there's an underlying condition for why we have panic attacks. Though we don't know it at the time, we're not consciously aware of why we're having them. They just like fly up out of the blue, you know, they just wash over us. They just come on like the weather, right? The weather changes. 1 minute is nice and warm and sunny, and then the dark clouds roll in, and you know, it's getting black, and it starts pouring out, and it's like that. You know, where did this come from? It was just sunny a few minutes ago. Yeah, if you live in New England like I do, that can happen. It changes in an instant. And that's how, like, the panic attacks come on. 1 minute you're fine and you're doing great, and the next minute, boom, you know, it just washes over you. But, yeah, that's what I'm saying. Like, you could feel like if you analyze it later on and say, what was going on for me at this time? In the moment, you don't know. You're just consumed by the panic. You don't know anything. All you know is the panic. But later on, if you try to analyze what was going on for me at this time, and then I realized I was seeing this therapist who had his own agenda, who tried to keep pushing my father, how terrible my father was. When, you know, my father was, you know, the better of the two parents. My father never physically, or, you know, abused me, or, you know, verbally abused me, or he was very calm, he was patient, and he listened to me. My mother never listened to me, not at all. And when my son got meningitis and almost died. He was in a coma when he was 4 years old, and he spent 2 years in the hospital. My mother never came to visit him once. It was my dad who came every week to see his grandson. He was, you know, we took him out, you know, to Dunkin' Donuts when he was in a wheelchair because he couldn't walk. I mean, he lost all function at that time. He regained his physical functions, but not his mental. He's 27 now and is at the cognitive ability of like a 2 or 3 year old, at best, more like a 2-year-old. So that just, you know, goes to show you that you really have to pay attention to who you're around. Don't listen to people who hurt you, who know nothing about, you know, what you're going through, who, when you have these panic attacks, who tell you to calm down or get over it or it'll be all right, because they don't know anything, because they would not be telling you that at all, you know. And let me know how, you know, how you're doing, if you've ever had panic attacks, what you do, if you give any helpful advice on what you can do. They say to breathe in a paper bag. That never helps me. What I like to do is just, like, you know, get some air, or unfortunately drink lots of alcohol. That's how I started turning into an alcoholic, by seeing these psychologists. I never had an alcohol problem in my life until my late 40s. I mean, I could go out to a restaurant and have a drink or two, maybe once a week, maybe once every other week or something, you know. Have a beer with a pizza on a Friday night. Now I drink like 4 or 5 vodka drinks every day, because these therapists have, you know, they really have messed me up very, very badly. Psychologically, they messed me up, yeah. It's just like with the fertility doctors. I don't believe in doctors, okay? I'm just going to give you my advice. I went to the fertility doctors. Guess what? I became infertile. I couldn't get pregnant for years. They told me, you'll never have a child. You never will. You need to do all these treatments, IVF and everything. And I didn't have money for IVF or all this shit. They said, well, you're never going to have a baby. So I stopped seeing the doctors. And guess what? Bingo! Month later, I'm pregnant. Then right after that, pregnant again with a second child. And I could have kept having baby after baby, but we only wanted to have 2 children. But the thing is, these doctors, they make you go in for one problem and you come out with like a dozen more. But listen to your gut, okay? Listen to your gut. After the panic attack, you know, after a while later, think about what was going on in your life around that time, you know. And when you're in the middle of it, forget it. Forget it. you're consumed. It consumes you. It swallows you whole, as you know if you had them. The panic attack swallows you whole. But try to think later on when when you're calmed down and they subside, like what was going on for me in my life around that time, Because I really think subconsciously that there's an underlying reason for the panic attack. Even though they come out of the blue and you feel fine one moment and the next, you're a mess. you're a walking zombie mess. Yeah, I think that subconsciously there is something going on that you're not consciously aware of that is bringing on the intense anxiety. I just think that, you're not aware of it. And if you do some self-analysis and think what's going on in your life and, how you might be able to, like I did, figure out what it was. It was my therapist. Yeah, his agenda, he kept pushing that agenda on me that caused the panic. And as soon as that therapy stopped, so did the panic attacks. Oh, thank God.